Under the cold winter throne, in the frozen winter palace inspired to become the strongest 12th Fool's executive officer, the Apprentice is gradually rising. A true master always has the heart of an apprentice, and as someone with the eye to see through the ages, I have already seen through everything. Xia You closed his eyes and looked up at the towering sky island. Key words of the novel. I am the Genshin Impact when I am the executive in the winter, but there is no pop-up window. I am the Genshin Impact when I am the executive in the winter. Download the complete works of TXT, and I am the Genshin Impact when I am the executive in the winter. Read the latest chapter. Chapter 1, 12th Seat. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1, 12th Seat. The sky in the country of winter is often snowing, and people here wear heavy winter clothes and walk on icy roads. Only when approaching the winter palace, there is no one passing through. Today's winter country is as quiet as ever, but the difference is that it has welcomed a new guest. A huge silver square table was placed in the dimly lit hall, with 12 figures standing on either side of the table. They are the fools, the hands and eyes of the Queen of Ice in the Winter Kingdom, each standing here for different reasons, either pursuing power, truth, or burning the old world. The candlelight lit on the table seemed to be extinguished by the cold, and suddenly the young flame trembled. I don't think this guy has the ability to be on par with us under the command of the Empress and become an executive dressed in glory. Sandone, dressed in the uniform of the Fool's executors, leaned against the huge mechanical puppet behind her, expressing her own opinion. A new colleague, I think this is quite interesting, isn't it? When I have time, I really want to have a good fight with this new colleague. Daddaria hugged her arms and looked at Xia You with a very interested expression. The other 9 executives did not speak, they were all scrutinizing the 12th executive, the Apprentice, personally appointed by Her Majesty the Queen, especially as the third girl. Goranbia did not open her eyes, but it seemed like she could see Xia Yu's appearance clearly. It seems that she is full of interest in Xia You, whose eyes are tightly closed like hers, but it is only for the behavior of closing her eyes, not for him personally. After a long silence, Piero, as the CEO, finally expressed his opinion. He was the original CEO clown, also the CEO's chief, and the person with the most say here. Since it was the decision made by Her Majesty the Queen, we have no choice but to accept it. We hope that you can make achievements that truly match your glory in the future. And Xia You finally spoke his first sentence after arriving at this hall. Of course, after all, I am still a newcomer and there are still many places I need to learn from everyone in the future. Xia You looked straight at the man with white hair and a majestic face, half wearing a mask, and said that among the people present, only he posed the heaviest threat to Xia You. I hope so. The executor is a casual job, but there are also some things that must be done. Would anyone be willing to take some short time to teach him? Piero scanned the executors present. The first person to speak was Puxinella, the rooster. He was also wearing the uniform of a Fool's executor, but the handsome uniform felt bloated on him. What caught Xia Yu's attention the most was his big nose, which was like the beak of a rooster. It's really regrettable. As the mayor until winter, I still have many important things to deal with. Being able to come this year has added too much burden to me. I, like Mr. Mayor, have busy affairs at the Bank of North, and I am not confident in entrusting those important matters to someone else besides me. Pantaron, the wealthy man, smiled and squinted. These two people had a hypocritical smile on their faces that made Xia You very uncomfortable, and the other executives had no intention of taking over him. Goranbia looked around and didn't see any other executives having any thoughts about bringing in new members. Just as she was about to raise her hand, she saw Daddaria speaking with the same thoughts as her. Since no one wants it, why don't you let me do it? Daddaria smiled heartily, looking at Xia You with some helplessness. Sorry, they are quite busy. You can follow me first and I will teach you. Xia You didn't open his eyes, but there was a hint of a smile on the corner of his mouth. Okay, then I'll trouble you, young master. Seeing that the two seemed to get along quite well, Piero left a message saying, "The meeting is over," and then turned around and left. At the exit of the Winter Palace, Puxinella and Pantalone each boarded 2 luxurious carriages. Ms. Rosalind and Miss Columbia walked side by side and left on a small path. The other executives also withdrew one after another, leaving only Xia You and Dongnia at the huge gate of Jidong country, appearing very desolate. "Thank you very much for helping me out." Xia You sincerely thanked Dongnia. Dongnia smiled and waved her hand. "It's nothing. When I first arrived, I was the same. No matter where I work, there are always some unpleasant colleagues around me. Just get used to it slowly." To be honest, when I received news today that there would be a new colleague, I was also quite surprised. "Speaking of which, what did you do to have Her Majesty personally appoint you?" Upon hearing these words, Xia You remembered a day ago when he rode his yellow bike in a car accident and passed by the goddess Akuya transfer station, crossing a different world but taking the wrong path to Tivot. "Just as I arrived at Tivot, I fell from the air and directly smashed the roof of the Winter Palace, falling into the sleeping quarters of the Ice Queen. With the ability to obtain the eye of Jian Gu from Akuya, he successfully imitated an attack by the Ice Queen, but also succeeded in GG because he did not possess the elemental power to launch that attack. Later, perhaps it was the Queen of Ice who appreciated his ability to imitate that saved him, and then asked him with a very cold expression, 'Are you going to become a fool's play on a winter night or a ghost in the cold ice?' Xia You is resolute in his heart. Of course, he is dedicating his loyalty to the great Queen of Jidong country. He doesn't want to die again, just kidding. So, in view of his ability to imitate, the Queen of Ice bestowed upon him the eye of the Ice Element God and the title of Apprentice as an executive officer, which led to what happened today. Of course, these cannot be told to Dongnia, no one can say, because the way he obtained the eye of God and the position of executor was too humiliating." Seeing Xia Yu's troubled expression, Dongnia did not continue to inquire. He looked at the gradually darkening sky and said to Xia You, "It's quite late today. Come home with me for a meal, and we'll talk about what we're going to talk about on the way." "Thank you very much then." The two of them arrived at the outskirts of Jidong country and got on the young master's carriage here. The young master on the carriage introduced what the executor needed to do. An executive is actually an idle position, most of the time can be used to do what one wants to do, but after receiving orders, one must also immediately execute them. The usual command received would be to handle some diplomatic matters, but it is also possible to obtain the divine hearts of the other 6 gods. "Did you see that woman with a very big chest at the resolution table before? She is my most disliked colleague. A few days ago, I received an order from the Empress through a clown, and I estimate she will be heading to Mond in a few days." The young master spoke on his own, his face full of displeasure when talking about the lady. "Am I just waiting for the task now?" Xia Yoshuan asked. "I guess so. If there's no task, you can come with me and I'll go to Liyue on standby." The carriage quickly stopped at the entrance of an orphanage, where the laughter of children could be heard, which was somewhat out of place with the lonely and indifferent atmosphere of Jidong country. Seeking investment followed. Up reading, end of this chapter. Chapter 2. Talk/Dongnia's Seeking Investment. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Dongnia, Seeking Investment. The two of them got off the carriage and before entering the orphanage, Dongnia stopped Xia You. "Listen, you may see Aracino later, who is the servant on the table just now. It's best not to get too close to her, because she's a guy who will raise his sharp sword against you as long as he has enough interests. Even if the weight of betrayal is enough, she can even betray the Empress. Anyway, be careful of her." Dongnia kindly reminded. Xia You nodded confidently and agreed, "I understand. I will also be more cautious of her in the future. Also, if you don't reveal our identities when you see the children later, just say that I am the best toy salesman in the winter country and you are my partner." Dongnia pleaded with a forced smile on her face, clasping her hands together. In fact, he felt a bit embarrassed to say this, but in order to prevent Talk and his team from being exposed to these things early, they had to do so. Xia You smiled at the corner of her mouth and said, "No problem, just wrap it around me. I knew you could be trusted. Let's go in together." I laughed when I saw Xia You agreeing to Daria. The two of them walked into the orphanage and saw a bright corridor. The wall lamps on both sides of the corridor illuminated the environment very brightly, just like during the day. This is in stark contrast to the lonely atmosphere outside, like a fairy tale castle in a dark forest. Xia You followed the young master and pushed the door into a spacious room. In the room, Aracino and a group of children were sitting around the warm fireplace, holding a storybook in her hand and telling stories to the children with a gentle smile on her face. She didn't stop until she noticed Daria and Xia You walking into the house. Wow! It's Dahlia's brother. The children were extremely happy to see Daria enter the house, and they gathered around excitedly. Daria also timely took out a small bag from his pocket, which was a one-eyed small treasure model he had ordered. Talk, Dongnia. Everyone has a share, queue up to collect it. Dahlia smiled and handed the model to everyone, while Aracino placed the storybook next to Xia You. The children are very cute, aren't they? Aracino looked at the smiles on the children's faces, and the corners of his mouth inadvertently rose slightly. The children are really cute. At first glance, I thought you were very cold, but I didn't expect you to have such a side, Xia You replied. Everyone has their own cherished things, and I like orphanages and the children here. If you can't be liked by the children, leave early. You're not welcome here, Aracino whispered, feeling her tone was dangerous. It seems that she noticed what was happening here. Daria asked the children to play with their new toys on the side, but she came to Xia Yu's side. Aracino, don't let the children hear what you're saying. Xia Yu's a good person, and I think the children will like him, said Daria standing in front of Xia Yu. I hope so, said Aracino with a cold expression. Daria took Xia Yu aside and said, don't argue with her. Her personality is just like that. I'll take you to see the children. Wait, actually I'm not very good at dealing with children. Are you very popular with children here? Xia Yu confirmed. Ha, no one here is more popular than me, including the woman over there. Daria mentioned this as if he was very enthusiastic, and a strong sense of pride arose. That's it. Xia Yu had already obtained the answer he wanted, and he slightly opened his eyes, revealing the purple eyes in his eyes. Just as Daria was curious about what he was going to do, he actually made his own voice and walked towards the children. Even the movements were completely consistent, it was like a replica of Daria, and the real Daria stood beside him with a bewildered expression. Children, how about we play games together? I'll teach you how to play Eagle Catch Chicken. Xia Yu replicated Daria's voice, expression, and demeanor using her eyes that could see through the vast expanse, creating a familiar sense of familiarity among the children in the orphanage. Wow, this big brother's voice is exactly the same as Daria's just now. Even the expression is the same. Looking at the smiles on the children's faces, Xia Yu introduced herself and said, Me, Xia Yu, the best toy salesperson in Jidong country, you can call me Xia Yu brother. Okay, the children responded in unison. Quickly, Xia Yu and the children played together, and then he waved at Dahlia to take him and the children to play a game they had never played before, the game of eagle catching chicks. Aracino couldn't help but twitch his lips as he watched the scene before him, just like two Daria. It was precisely because of their identical appearance that they became increasingly uncomfortable. But since the children like him, Aracino won't say anything. It's almost time for dinner, and Aracino left the room and walked towards the kitchen of the orphanage. Xia Yu spent a pleasant game time with the children, teaching them how to catch chicks, jump squares, and flip flower ropes. In short, the children were very happy. Xia Yu's popularity even surpassed that of Daria at one point, which made Daria very depressed. After the children were tired of playing, Xia You and Dongnia sat next to him, and he looked at Xia You with a new look. I didn't expect you to have this skill. It's quite impressive. Dongnia and talk really like you, and I want to ask you to come and help me play with the children when I'm busy. Dongnia smiled brightly. It's not impossible either. If I have time, I will definitely come. Xia You returned to his original appearance and smiled lightly. While the children were busy playing the game that Xia You had just taught them, Dongnia grabbed Xia Yu's shoulder and said, "Let's go and compete. I've been curious about your strength since we met." Xia You did not refuse. If it was just a simple martial arts skill, Xia You could easily imitate it using the Eye of Jianjigu, which is what he currently needs, so he did not refuse. The two of them went outdoors, and on an icy lake several hundred meters away from the orphanage, the young master reached out and summoned his weapon. The Winter Extreme White Star. Xia You touched his clothes pocket but couldn't find anything. Helpless, he could only use the divine eye gifted by the Empress to condense an ice bow. At the end of this competition, whether you lose or win, I will give you a weapon as a gift, said Dongnia generously. Thank you then. After looking at each other, the competition began. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Empress's Order Seeking Investment. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Empress's Order Seeking Investment. The young master was the first to draw a bow and shoot arrows, and an arrow filled with water elements flew towards Xia You. The shadow of the arrow fell in Xia Yu's eyes. In the next moment, Xia You also drew a bow and shot arrows, and the same arrow flew out from Xia Yu's bowstring. But this attack seemed very familiar to the young master, as if he had launched it himself. That's not the key yet. The key is, Big Brother, you are clearly the eye of the ice element god. Why did you send out an attack from the water element? Actually, this is the characteristic of the eye of Jianjigu, also known as observing martial arts. No matter what it is, whether it is written language, the use of weapons, various strange martial arts, or even physical fitness, such as genetic abilities and special abilities of other races, everything in the world can be fully understood and proficiently used by just seeing it with one's own eyes. It is a technique that approximates monsters. In the next moment, Xia Yu's arrow collided with Dongnia's arrow, which was very dangerous. His arrow barely offset Dongnia's arrow. This was actually intentional by Xia You, pretending to only imitate the surface, otherwise he was afraid that next time Dongnia would avoid using his moves. After all, who wants their ultimate moves to be perfectly imitated by others? What Xia You wants now is to make everyone underestimate his abilities, so that he can unconsciously learn everyone's abilities thoroughly. Although he doesn't know anything now, he also has his own trump card to save his life. On that day, I fell into the palace of the Ice Queen and learned from her attack, as well as her oppression. The attack of the Ice Queen requires too much elemental power, but it does not consume elemental power with the power of intimidation. Not everyone has the ability to resist the Ice Queen's oppression. Seeing the scene of arrows colliding, Dongnia couldn't help but laugh and said, I finally understand why the Empress bestowed upon you the title of Apprentice. Is that so? Although it only imitates half multiplication, it still belongs to a very powerful ability. This ability is just a bit flashy, and I can't compare it to you, Dongnia. Learning half of it is already barely enough, and there are still many things that cannot be learned. Xia You forced a smile and said that on the surface, he was belittling his abilities, but in his heart, he had been hoping that Dongnia would use all the moves he knew. And Dongnia seemed to know what he was thinking, almost using his own moves without reservation, because he knew that Xia You could only learn half of it, and there were also some difficult ones that he couldn't learn, so he didn't pay much attention to them. Water flashing, fast shooting, whale walking, sudden attack and slaying, water blade blocking, and blocking skills were repeatedly used by him. But throughout, the young master did not use his own ultimate moves or evil eye liberation. He is afraid of hurting the newcomer Xia You with his big moves, but using his evil eyes to liberate and harm others feels unnecessary. Seeing that no new moves had appeared, Xia You simply sold a loophole and intentionally lost. Dongnia came to Xia Yu's side and helped him up, comforting him, "It's okay to lose. Let's work harder next time. People must have a process of growth." Poor Dongnia didn't know that Xia Yu had already stripped off all his underwear except for the big move, and he was almost in a normal state. Seeing the sincere smile on Dongnia's face, Xia Yu couldn't help but feel a sense of guilt in her heart. When the two of them returned to the orphanage, the children had already gathered in the restaurant, with tempting food on the table, freshly baked bread, hot milk, pork chops, and stewed soup just out of the oven. After dinner, the children all left the restaurant, leaving only Xia Yu, Dongnia, and Aracino leaning against the wall. Just now, the clown sent someone to pass on the order of the Empress. The Empress said she wanted this newcomer to accompany the lady to Mond to retrieve the heart of the wind god. "It will be a week later," Aracino said calmly. The young master put down his knife and fork, wiped his mouth with a tissue, and said, "This is too sudden. How could the Empress ask the newcomer to take the heart of the gods? Isn't there still a lady? You should believe her. It's no use telling me about this matter. If you want to ask, go ask the clown, or meet with the queen." After Aracino finished speaking, she drifted away. Only the young master and Xia Yu sat opposite each other at the dining table. "Wow, it's actually Madam. If it's someone else who doesn't have such a strained relationship with me, I can ask them to take good care of you. As Madam, you can only pray that she won't target you to death for my sake." Dongnia said with a bitter smile. Xia Yu also wanted to laugh. "For the sake of your face, she targeted me to death. She probably wouldn't do anything to use her companions as tools, would she? After all, the first impression that a lady gives Xia Yu is arrogance. Arrogant people should disdain to wear small shoes for their colleagues. My advice to you is that when Mond and she act separately, you don't need to listen to her assigning tasks. After all, as both executives, no one can give orders except for the chief clown. The young master said with a slightly serious expression. "I'll pay attention, thank you for your reminder," Xia Yu said in gratitude. Soon, a maid came to tidy up the table, while Dongnia left the orphanage with Xia Yu. There are many places out of town that require the use of Mora. I will take you to apply for an activity fund at Bagua Bank. Although it is an activity fund, you can use it any way you want. Anyway, I won't hesitate to use it, the young master said as he walked. Xia Yu is also curious about how much funds this so-called event can have. He followed the young master and the two quickly arrived at the headquarters of Bagua Bank, which was filled with the aura of money. The pure white walls made of unknown materials, with gold plating and extremely beautiful patterns, cost a lot of money at first glance. This place is like a huge industrial fortress, where everyone is very busy, doing what they need to do with clear division of labor without stopping, without saying a word. It was only after seeing the two young tellers, Dongnia and Xia You, dressed in the uniforms of the fool's executioners, who were busy recording data, that they stopped their work. "Young master, apprentice, go in, may I ask if there is anything I can help you with," said the teller with great respect. Dongnia looked at Xia Yu and said, "I'm here to take my new colleague to apply for activity funds." "So it's like this, please wait a moment," the teller lady said again, "if you need to apply for activity funds, you need to register an account first." As she was speaking, Xia Yu saw a figure from the second floor of Bagua Bank that she had just seen before. Rich man, Panteron. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Rich/Apprentice Seeking Investment. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Wealthy people learn from teachers and seek investment. At this moment, the teller lady also noticed Panteron and quickly stopped her work in her hand to salute. "Rich man, your safety." The rich man, Panteron, didn't look at her, but instead looked straight at Xia Yu with narrowed eyes and smiled. "I have always felt very sorry for this afternoon's meeting. It was my fault for not being able to do a good job in helping the new colleagues join. Dongnia still has Xia Yu, please follow my office on the second floor. I have prepared the funds for the event. After speaking, Pantaron turned around and walked towards the second floor. Looking at the apologetic smile on Pantaron's face, Xia Yu's impression of him improved slightly, but it was just a little bit. Well, let's go, I'm here. Daddaria nodded at Xia Yu and followed closely behind. The two of them followed Pantaron into a room with a lot of filing cabinets. The sound insulation in the room was very good, and all they could hear was the sound of a pendulum on a black desk. Pantaron opened a chair and looked at the two of them. Please sit down, both of you. Xia Yu saw at a glance that this was Pantaron's probing of him. There was only one chair to sit in, but they were sitting together. It was obvious that she wanted to see his reaction to this matter and infer his personality. What a cunning fox. Xia Yu also happened to use this to create a character for himself. After all, what kind of character suits what kind of script? What he wants is to be underestimated. Xia Yu pushed Daddaria and said, Daddaria, why don't you come and sit down? After all, I'm just a newcomer. A weak enough answer made Pantaron's right eyebrow slightly curl up. Xia Yu was not sure what this guy was thinking, but this guy could never know what Xia Yu was thinking. The young master is not a novice either. He also saw Pantaron's plan and pushed the chair aside directly. There's no need to sit down, let's talk about the main business. Where is the funding for the event? Looking at the young master with a slightly displeased tone, Pantaron also had some thoughts in his heart. He showed his usual squinting smile and then pressed the fixed bell on the table. Soon, a maid pushed open the door and brought in 3 cups of black tea and a plate of cookies, then bowed and left the room. The event funds will be mentioned later. I haven't treated you well yet. Let's drink a cup of black tea and have some dim sum. Pantaron took the lead in picking up a cup of black tea and put it in his mouth and gently sipped. Xia Yu followed closely behind, picked up a cup of black tea, took a sip, gave it a couple of puffs, and then vomited on the ground. What kind of black tea is this? It's so annoying to me. Seeing that Pantaron was not angry, he still had a smile on his face and said, Oh, I'm sorry, maybe the maid put too much sugar. I will punish them well. The young master looked coldly at Pantaron, knowing that all of this was intentional by Pantaron, but he couldn't directly reveal it. Xia Yu is still too straightforward. This kind of person is not suitable to be with an old fox like Pantaron. It's okay, it's okay. I accidentally dirted the floor of your office. Xia Yu looked at the ground sprinkled with black tea with a puzzled expression. If the floor gets dirty, someone will come to help clean it. Don't worry, Pantaron was speaking when the door was knocked again. Enter, Pantaron said lightly. A member of the group of fools wearing a mask and black clothes walked in. Report to the young master, Lord Puxinella, the rooster, has something very urgent to ask you to return to the orphanage, said the members of the fool after bowing. The young master frowned and said, It's amazing that it's at this moment. I know, you can step back, the young master said in a deep voice. He passed by Xia Yu and said in a voice that only 2 people could hear, Don't be impulsive. Just endure it and it will pass. Then he pushed open the door of the room and left. I was originally planning to give the young master some good tea, but it seems he is very busy. Now we can continue our discussion. I am curious why the Empress personally promoted you as an executor. Pantaron asked with a smile on his face. Perhaps it's because of my combat talent. I can learn other people's combat moves by watching them once, even if their power is less than half of others. Xia Yu smiled as she touched the back of her head. That's it, this is your activity funds. If you need cash, you can go to the Northern Bank at the mission location to withdraw it. Pantaron took out a booklet from the drawer behind his desk and pushed it to Xia Yu, which was considered a passbook. Thank you, Mr. Pantaron, Xia Yu said with a naive smile as she took the passbook. You're welcome, this is my job. Pantaron shrugged and smiled. The atmosphere remained silent for more than 10 seconds. Pantaron frowned slightly, wondering why Xia Yu hadn't left yet. May I ask if there's anything else? Xia You seemed a bit embarrassed, and his tone was a bit coy. I admire Mr. Panteron very much. Mr. Panteron is so young that he can establish such a large commercial organization as the Northern Bank. I want to learn from you. Seeing Xia You clasping her hands in a sincere tone in front of her, Panteron was still somewhat surprised, but it did not show on her face. He chuckled lightly and said, "Ha ha ha, Xia You have been praised too much. Aren't you becoming an executive at such a young age? Forget about the matter of apprenticeship, but I can give you some guidance." Xia You pretended to be delighted and said, "Thank you, Mr. Panteron." Panteron coughed and stood up from his seat, coming to a bookshelf next to his desk and pulling out a few books from inside. "These are all the books I have written about business. Take them back and read them more. Learning these is enough for you," said Panteron, handing 3 books to Xia You. Xia You took these 3 books and looked very precious. She bowed to Panteron again. "I know, Mr. Panteron. I will take these books back and read them carefully. It's getting late now, so I won't disturb your rest." After finishing speaking, Xia You pushed the door open and left the office. After Panteron sat back at his desk, he used his left hand to tap his chin and his right index finger repeatedly on the table. After a few minutes, there was no more sound in the large office, and then a short figure walked out of the room with a cane behind a bookshelf. "Panteron, what do you think of this young man?" An old but powerful voice rang out. "The heat is still light, and I like to speak according to my own temperament. What I say is consistent with the intelligence I have received. Dogs who are too straightforward and can bite people do not bark. I have a low evaluation of him, so I only gave him the least of the 3 activity funds I prepared." Panteron smiled. "Really? I don't think so, such a young person is very nice." The old man's voice also had a hint of laughter. "Hee, it's a good tool, isn't it, Mr. Mayor? Thanks to you sending someone to tell me about their visit to Bagua Bank." The 2 of them smiled at each other in the darkness. "I won't write the one with good grades, focus on writing this one." End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Black Rock Longbow, Seeking Investment. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Black Rock Longbow, Seeking Investment. The snow was still falling, and Xia You was walking back to the orphanage. After noticing that there was no one around, the smile on his face gradually disappeared. The character has already been established, so there is no need to act in empty spaces. In fact, what he just did was not entirely for the purpose of establishing a character. Just now, he had completely copied Panteron's thoughts with the eyes of Jigu, which would be helpful to him since he is about to go to Mond. It is better to find a convenient position for himself, other than an executive. In his opinion, a businessman is a good choice. Since everyone has become a businessman, let's also try doing business. To do something is to do the best, and he also wants to see what kind of expression he will show when he defeats Panteron in his best field. No, not just businessmen. These are not enough. How can one not strive to become the most perfect person without the perfect ability of seeing the eyes of Jigu? Anything that can be seen, learned, or beneficial will be utilized by Xia You until it reaches its peak. This is Xia Yu's exclusive ambition. Desire can make people progress. Let's see later, Xia You murmured, his eyes filled with confidence at this moment. Xia You continued to walk, and near the orphanage, he met Daddaria who was rushing back. "Xia You, as long as you're okay, Panteron didn't do anything to you, did he?" the young master asked with concern. "It's not much of me, I think he's pretty good, so I learned how to do business from him." Xia You smiled sincerely. Dongnia patted her forehead and finally sighed, "You're just too straightforward. You can't listen to everything he says. Remember to tell me anything you have, and I don't know what you think. Anyway, I really hate interacting with these ambitious people." Xia You nodded and said, "Where are we going now?" The young master looked at the orphanage, then at the villa area in Winter City, and said, "I'll take you back to my house to sleep. Be careful of Aracino in the orphanage, I'm afraid this guy will take the bounty and chop your head at night." Xia You couldn't help but laugh and said, "It shouldn't be so. The consequences of beheading an executive are very serious." "Don't laugh, I'm serious. As long as the price is enough, this woman can do anything," said the young master with an extremely serious expression. Xia You didn't laugh anymore. He nodded to show that he understood and followed Dongnia, who was chattering about how dangerous Aracino was, to his home. Dongnia's home is very large, with a 3-story villa and a childlike decoration inside. Even pink cloth dolls can be seen in the corners of the living room. In order to avoid any misunderstandings from Xia You, Dongnia quickly explained, because Talk and Dongnia often bring other children over to play, so the decoration is like this. "Don't laugh." Xia You was very serious, but he didn't smile. "Why do your younger siblings live in an orphanage?" "They don't live in an orphanage, they just go there often to play, and they still come back home at night. It's my other home, where my family is. It's because that home can't live anymore that I brought you here," explained the young master. "Spend more time with your family. In life, family is the most important thing to cherish," Xia You said with a smile. Dongnia nodded in agreement, and Xia You felt very comfortable getting along. He enjoyed interacting with people like this. He brought Xia You to the guest room and said, "This is your room. Go to bed early today, and tomorrow show your good spirits. I will take you to Capitano, the captain, to apply for some soldiers." "Soldier?" Xia You spoke curiously. "Yeah, you don't want to be a bare-barred executive, do you? As an executive, you must have your own confidants, and you don't want your team to be filled with people planted by other executives, do you?" The young master grinned. Xia You shook his head quickly. He didn't want his every move to be monitored by others, but he still had one question. Since the soldiers were all received from the captain, then these soldiers should all be the captain's people, right? Xia Yoshun asked. "Do you know why the captain is responsible for matters related to soldiers?" "It is precisely because he is an upright person who values honor extremely and would not do such a thing," explained the young master with a smile. "Since you have said so, Dongnia, I am not worried anymore." Xia You nodded and said good night to Dongnia, then walked into the room and closed the door. Nothing happened overnight. The next morning, Xia Yu's door was knocked on, and Xia You, who was looking at the floor mirror in the room to tidy her hair, walked over and opened the door. "Hi, did you sleep well last night? I'm here to fulfill my promise." The young master greeted Xia You and handed him a bow and arrow from behind. Looking at this bow and arrow, which was pitch black all over and had wings on both sides as red as blood, Xia You felt that this bow was definitely not cheap. "This is the Black Rock Battle Bow, with incredibly tough arms. It's my collection, and I think it fits you well, so I chose this one," Dongnia laughed. Xia You took this bow and arrow from Dongnia's hand, and the first feeling he had was that it was heavy, but after adapting to this weight, he could probably use it freely. After all, his current physique is the same as the young master's. "Do you like it?" "If you don't like it, I'll give you another one," Dongnia asked. "I like it. Thank you, Dongnia. I owe you a favor, and if there's a chance, I'll repay it to you." Xia You thanked Dongnia. "Why are you so polite to me? It's rare for one of my colleagues to get along with me. The other executives are either ambitious or research-driven, and it's boring to watch." The young master took the opportunity to complain. "Haha." Xia You smiled with empathy as she remembered those people who were difficult to get along with at first glance at the previous meeting. "Wash up and come with me. The toiletries have been placed on the table next door. Captain Capitano will be training early in the morning. It's 6 o'clock now, and it's just right for us to go over now," said Dongnia. Xia You nodded and walked into the neighboring restroom. After taking care of his own image, Xia You walked out of Dongnia's villa. There was a carriage parked at the entrance of Dongnia's villa, and he was already waiting for Xia You on the carriage. After getting on the carriage and sitting firmly, the carriage slowly started to move. In winter, it was quite cold, and even the hooves of the horse were wrapped in special cold jackets. Dongnia rubbed her hands to add some heat to her palm and said, "Summer, are you cold? Do you want me to give you a scarf?" "No need, Dongnia's strength is so strong that he shouldn't feel cold, why wear a scarf?" Xia You asked in confusion. Now that his physique is the same as the young master, it is reasonable to say that he is not cold, and Dongnia is not cold either. "Oh, this is what my sister Dongnia gave me. You saw her in the orphanage before, and to me, this scarf represents the bond between our families." The young master lowered his head and looked at the corner of the red scarf with a gentle smile on his lips. "At present, it seems that this should have been okay. I hope it can be stable. After learning from previous lessons, I will focus on restoring the character." End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Captain. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Captain. Surprisingly, there was no snow in the winter city today. As soon as Xia You followed Dongnia out of the carriage, she heard the sound of neat footsteps stepping on the ground not far away. Following the sound, one can see countless foolish soldiers standing on a large square, divided into different formations. The one wearing a hood and cloak over there is a debt handler, the woman in blue with her eyes covered is a hidden mirror lady, and the woman holding a lantern is a sorcerer of various elements. The young master explained a lot to Xia You at once, and only after introducing all the branches did he bring Xia You to the front of the team. This is a tall and burly man standing with a silver-black helmet that cannot be seen clearly. This is the Captain, Capitano that Xia You met at the last meeting. He is a person who values honor extremely. Yesterday, I heard from Dongnia that Xia You thought he would be easier to get in touch with, but now it doesn't seem like that. As soon as the two arrived, Capitano greeted Dongnia, but ignored him on the side. Dongnia saw that the situation was not right and seemed to have thought of something. He leaned over to Xia You and whispered, "I forgot. The captain may not be satisfied with you stepping onto the executive position. In his opinion, you have no honor and are not worthy of your position. Let me tell you now. Don't make him angry." Upon hearing this, Xia You nodded. He had seen many old-fashioned people like Capitano who highly valued honor and qualifications in their previous companies. Dongnia chuckled and then came to Capitano's side, saying with a smile, "Captain Capitano, I'm here today to lead the newcomers to apply for his own soldiers." Capitano tilted his head slightly and said with a cold face, "Humph. I'm afraid all the honors of my soldiers here are above him, right? What qualifications does he have to lead troops?" But it seems that Capitano made concessions in order to give Dongnia some face and not embarrass him. "Tell me about your requirements, newcomer," Capitano said in a deep voice as he looked at Xia You. Xia You could hear Capitano's dissatisfaction in his tone, but he didn't care. "I want to know how to protect my soldiers," he said. Capitano seemed somewhat surprised as he repeatedly asked, "Say it again." "I want soldiers who know how to protect themselves and cherish their lives," Xia You said, looking directly at Capitano. Capitano couldn't help but burst out laughing, and he looked at all the soldiers present and loudly said, "Your new CEO wants cowardice, you want to be his soldier, you want to be the kind of guy who can't even be as good as a mouse without glory. If you're willing, immediately step out." The atmosphere on the field was very quiet, with no one moving and no one willing to be under the cover of Xia You. "Listen up, kid. I don't have the kind of person you need here. Not everyone is like you," Capitano sternly rebuked. Xia You ignored his scolding and instead looked at the foolish soldiers present, shouting loudly, "Everyone! I know everyone doesn't agree with what I just said. Perhaps someone has already mocked me in their hearts, but I still need to speak clearly. The warrior I want is not a coward. In my opinion, before becoming a warrior, everyone here can first interact with the entire world as people. Instead of becoming a cold and ruthless machine." Xia You wanted to continue speaking, but was mercilessly interrupted by Capitano. "Enough. It's just nonsense. Soldiers in the winter country never need those things. These extra emotions will only become a burden for soldiers. Today. Here. Everyone here. No one will follow you. Dongnia looked at Capitano, who was so angry that he almost wanted to fight with Xia You, and was about to step forward to appease him. However, he saw 3 people gradually emerge from the huge army formation. A Thunderhammer vanguard from the Fool's Vanguard, a Thundering Warlock, and a Firearm Guerrilla. Dongnia looked at them in surprise, and Capitano glared angrily over. Bastard! What are you doing? Get back in the army now. The 3 soldiers lowered their heads and remained silent, but Xia You looked at Capitano and said, as agreed, I will take them out of here. From now on, they will be my subordinates. Capitano laughed back angrily and said, get out of here. Cowards should stay together. Dongnia rubbed Xia You with his elbow when he saw the situation was not good. You take them with you first, and I will advise the captain. Xia You nodded and said, come with me, follow me from today on. He left the training square with 3 people, and when he left, he noticed that the soldiers present were looking at him and these 3 soldiers with disdainful eyes. After leaving the training ground and arriving at an empty land, Xia You first introduced herself, saying, my name is Xia You, the Executor, Apprentice. I will be your superior in the future, and I can gradually understand the rest. Now it's your turn to introduce yourself. The 3 of them looked at each other, and first, Hammer Pioneer began introducing himself. My name is Kolya Schnitzwix, and I am a member of the 9th Company of the Fools. Here, I offer my loyalty to Her Majesty the Queen and the Apprentice. Next came the Firearm Guerrillas, who continued to speak in a formatted manner. My name is Nikolai Schnitzwix, and I am also a member of the 9th Company. Here, I offer my loyalty to Her Majesty the Queen and the Apprentice. Finally, it was the turn of Warlock laying, I, Katerina Schnitzwix, apologize for the mistake. Katerina Schnitzwix, a member of the 9th Company, offers loyalty to Her Majesty the Queen and the Apprentice. Schnitz. Xia You asked curiously. Nikolai first spoke up and explained, it's like this. Orphans who grew up in the fireplace house will be given the surname Schnitzwix by male orphans in the winter country, and Schnitzvna by female orphans. Upon hearing the 4 words, fireplace house, Xia You inexplicably thought of the orphanage of the servant. Is the dean of your orphanage Aracino? Xia You asked. Nikolai nodded repeatedly, that's right. I see. Can I know why you chose to come with me? Xia You continued to ask. This time, Kolya answered, because we have a good relationship and are afraid of being transferred to different teams in the future, so. Halfway through, Kolya was interrupted by Catalina, we are cowards. The task assigned by Captain is too dangerous. It's not like that, I'm the only coward. I walked out of the team first and they followed me. Nikolai's face was full of apologies. Watching the 3 of them nervous, Xia You smiled relieved and said, what should I do? Don't be nervous. Following me is not like following other executives. I don't have any particularly dangerous tasks for you to do, just relax. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Puppetry. You are listening at novelfull.audio. This translator is experiencing an error, please try another translator. Chapter 8. Go to Mond. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Go to Mond, Katerina, Kolya, Nikolai, Agatha, my requirement for all 4 of you is to pretend to be my guards. From now on, I am just a businessman from the winter to Mond looking for business opportunities. Don't let others discover your identity. Can you do that? Xia You looked at the 4 people standing neatly in a row and asked. Without any hesitation, the 4 of them spoke in unison, everything is as the apprentice wishes, and we will swear to death to complete the apprentice's mission. Sandone sat in the arms of the ruin's heavy machine behind her, with a faint smile on her face. Is it enough for the captain to give you 3 soldiers? If not, I'll lend you my soldiers. The current number of people is just right, too many people will attract unnecessary suspicion. Xia You touched her head and smiled. He has been studying machinery with Sandone in her laboratory for the past 5 days and proposed the idea of popularizing various types of machinery to the 7 countries in order to seek more benefits and manufacture more machinery. After receiving approval from Sandone, the two reached a collaboration, and Agatha was sent by her to Mond with Xia You to be responsible for the follow-up cooperation and connectivity. After confirming that there was no need for her, Sandone returned to her factory to continue studying the drawings provided by Xia You. Xia You and her 4 subordinates also boarded the plane that they had been tinkering with Sandone for the past few days. The shape of the plane looked more like an old-fashioned glider. After all, time was limited, so it was already good to be able to create such a thing. The 4 of them looked at the plane in a novel way. As the engine started, the energy device began to operate, and the propellers at the front of the plane began to rotate. The entire plane also began to move forward. Finally, after a pre-takeoff run, the plane successfully took off. The altitude of the plane gradually increased, and the 4 of them collectively exclaimed in surprise. Undoubtedly an apprentice, he has created such an amazing thing. Agatha praised her. Nikolai and Korya nodded in agreement with Agatha's statement. But at that moment, Katerina spoke and pointed to the tire on the ground that fell off for some unknown reason, saying, "Did the plane lose parts?" Xia You stretched his head out the window and saw that the wheels of the plane had indeed fallen to the ground, but he didn't care. "Don't worry, even without wheels, it can fly," Xia You said lightly. Katerina breathed a sigh of relief upon hearing this, but at that moment a pigeon collided with the propeller on the right side of the plane, which quickly stopped rotating. To avoid losing balance, the left propeller was turned off. At this moment, he could feel the nervousness of the 4 people behind him, and he continued to reassure, "Don't worry, even a propeller can fly." The 4 of them nodded consecutively. Since Xia You had said so, there should be no problem. They had to trust Xia You unconditionally because he was the executor, and the executor would not make such a low-level mistake. At this moment, Xia You seemed to remember something. He grabbed a large screw from the outer pocket of his clothes. At this moment, he remembered that there seemed to be many screws still missing on the plane. Sure enough, the plane quickly encountered problems, with the front propeller falling off the plane and the main body and propeller flying separately. At this moment, Katerina finally couldn't hold her tension anymore. Even if she was foolish, she knew that without the propeller, the plane couldn't fly. "Apprentice. What should we do now?" "Without a propeller, we would fall to death," Katerina said nervously. "Don't worry, even without a propeller, it can still fly," Agaxia comforted Xia You with a smile as she saw Xia You still looking calm. Xia You looked at Agatha and gave her a thumbs up. "I am truly a puppet subordinate, I have insight. You are right, I can fly without a propeller." As Xia You spoke, she pressed a button on the plane, and for a moment, there were roars coming from inside the plane. The interface of the energy device switched to another position, and another set of driving devices started. This time, the flight characteristics of the Relic Hunter were adopted, and 4 levitators that could enable it to fly were installed at the bottom of the aircraft, controlling the altitude of the flight through energy output power. Seeing the steady flight of the plane, Katerina finally felt relieved. She looked apologetically at Xia You and said, "Sorry, Apprentice." Xia You smiled at her and said, "It's inevitable to get nervous on the first flight. Oh, by the way, do you remember what to call me when you get to Mond?" "Mr. Xia You," Katerina quickly replied. "That's right, remember not to call me wrong," Xia You confirmed and turned her body back. Now, several hundred meters above the ground, he can see an endless snowfield. "If we fly higher, maybe we can see the Dandelion Sea. I heard it's very beautiful there, and I really want to take my 2 brothers to see it," Agatha yearned. "If there's a chance, I'll take you for a stroll." I'm also very interested in these natural landscapes, Xia You smiled. Located to the north of Mond in winter, adjacent to Monada and Fengdan, Xia You and a few others arrived in Mond in less than a day. According to the lady's speed, it should take several more days to reach. Thinking of Lady Xia You makes me want to laugh. When he went to find her this morning, she had already left with her own team, and now she is even slower than him. Xia You landed the plane in the Whispering Forest and buried it on the spot. Interestingly, while digging the pit, he found a wooden sign with 4-leaf clover painted on it and a box. Opening the box reveals a plush toy hidden in a red bag. I patted it twice with my hand, and the plush toy was quite elastic. Just as he was about to take this cute little toy away, a cute child's voice echoed behind him. "Big brother, don't use your hands to pat Collie's bouncing," Collie said nervously. Xia You followed the sound and found a cute little girl wearing red clothes and carrying a small backpack. "What are you saying? What don't you want?" Xia You didn't hear clearly and didn't know what bouncing was. He instinctively pinched the soft doll in his hand. Then a loud explosion sounded, and a large group of birds in the forest were startled and flew into the sky. Kelly looked at Xia You lying on the ground with her hair curled up by the fire element, and the powerless duck sat on the ground. "Oh, Collie's done." Upon hearing the commotion, Amber ran over and saw something like this. The ground was scorched black, and 5 people lay on the ground. The person in the middle was the most miserable. The originally flowing bangs were as if they had been scalded, and the clothes on the upper body were all torn and tattered by the explosion. "Kelly, you." Amber looked at Kelly in surprise. "I'm sorry, Sister Amber, but it wasn't intentional." "Just now, when she buried Bounce, this big brother dug it out again," said Kelly, feeling a bit lost. Amber helplessly supported his forehead. "This is not the first time. The last time a traveler from another world was still lying in the intensive care unit of Shifeng Church." Seeking votes and investments, end of this chapter. Chapter 9. Idols. You are listening at novelfull.audio. This translator is experiencing an error, please try another translator. Chapter 10. Time-Space. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Time-Spacing blushed when asked by Pai Meng, and she stuttered, "Of course I'm 18 years old." Haha. Pai Meng touched his chin and said, "But he said you'll take care of you for a lifetime if you're over 50 years old. You can get 50,000 moles every month, and you don't have to do anything." Ing seemed to be angry and embarrassed. She picked up Pai Meng and pinched her face. "I told you I'm 18 years old, can you stop talking?" Xia You watched with great interest as the two of them played around, not intending to stop them. After all, such a thing seemed quite interesting. At that moment, the door was knocked on, and a blonde lady walked into the room with the little girl in red whom Xia You had seen before. The little girl in red ran up to Xia You with a strong apology in her tone. "I'm sorry big brother, but Kelly shouldn't have planted bombs indiscriminately. Can you forgive Kelly?" "Sorry, as a traveler from a foreign land, Kelly didn't mean it. The children were just playful, and it's our knight's lack of care for this matter. We will provide you with satisfactory compensation for it," Qin said sincerely as she approached Kelly. Xia You touched Kelly's head and looked at Qin. "It's not enough to bury bombs indiscriminately. Fortunately, it was me who dug it up. If it were someone else, it might be seriously injured." "You're right. After this, I will definitely discipline Kelly well," Qin agreed seriously and then looked at Kelly. "Kelly, you go back to the confinement room yourself. I have something else to say to this big brother." "Okay," Kelly reluctantly agreed and walked out of the room with her head down. Then, surrounded by Pemin and Ing, Qin promised a full compensation of 5 million mora, and of course, the bill was sent to Collie's mother Alice. Apart from this matter, Qin and Xia You have no further interaction, and she looks very busy. If my identity as an executive is exposed, I would definitely be targeted, Xia You thought to himself, feeling that it's pretty good now. When flying in the sky before, I heard the sound of the musical instrument in Mond City, which should be different from the cold winter country. Xia You is planning to go into business and fish here for a period of time. If you have a divine heart, just have a lady. Anyway, he is just a newcomer, and the newcomer can use the excuse of being a newcomer to lie down reasonably. If the lady cannot do it, he will go back. Hey! If I didn't hear you wrong, you just got 5 million mora. You can't treat us to eat. Pai Meng rubbed his hands and flew up to Xia You, but before he could finish speaking, he was firmly caught in the sight of Xia Yu's 500,000 face value mora. This is your salary and meal for this month. Take it and eat whatever you want, Xia You said casually. Watching Ying and Pai Meng Xiao excitedly run out of the intensive care unit, he breathed a sigh of relief. He looked at the other 4 beds, and the 4 subordinates were still sleeping. Fortunately, they changed into casual clothes this time, otherwise something would have happened. As the sky gradually darkened, Xia Yu's eyelids became heavier and heavier, and he fell asleep watching the fiery red sunset outside the window. You shouldn't be so tired, Xia Yu thought at the moment before falling asleep. In a daze, he felt like he had come into a space of hazy colors. He stood on a small path with many doors on either side. What are these? Xia Yu frowned and looked at these doors. He didn't recklessly open one of them, but looked at his left and right sides. Finally, he chose to walk to the left, trying to find a way out. After walking for a long time, he never reached the end. Helplessly, Xia Yuan returned to the original starting point and walked towards the right side. The right side quickly reached the end, only separated by 7 doors. There is no road at the end on the right, and below is an abyss that cannot be seen to the end. Xia Yu dare not jump down rashly. Without any other path to choose from, Xia Yu opened the door closest to her. As the door opened, a dazzling light illuminated the entire space, and when the light faded, he saw a chaotic city of Mond. The flames were burning, and the strong wind blew away the tiles on the roof. The residents of Mond were fleeing outside the city. At this moment, he saw a child kneeling on the ground, crying and calling for his mother. The child's leg was injured. A west wind knight came to the child's side, wanting to hug him and run together, but the next moment he was knocked to the ground by a flying beam. Xia Yu ran over to save these 2 people, but he was surprised to find that he couldn't touch anything here. Here. What exactly is it? Xia Yu was very puzzled, and he saw the door that had just entered by his side. He walked back in and returned to the space with many doors. He looked up at the door and saw the number on it .7 with some vague speculations in her heart. Xia Yu came to the door marked with .1 and walked in. The familiar cold, the familiar white, the snow falling from the sky in the palm of Xia Yu's hand. Here is the end of winter. What's wrong, Xia Yu? Why are you standing still? Tomorrow you're leaving, and I'll treat you to a special winter delicacy. Dongnia smiled and waved at Xia Yu from the front. The door around me still exists. This is yesterday. Is it the power of time that brought me here? Xia Yu rushed into the alley and casually called out the door to leave. As he left, another Xia Yu appeared again, looking around in confusion. Why am I here? Didn't Dad Arya say he invited me to dinner? Returning to that time and space, Xia Yu couldn't calm down in her heart. Being able to travel through time was such a powerful force. With this, even the most difficult thing can be achieved. But at this moment, he suddenly thought to himself, what would happen if I didn't exist at that point in time? Thinking of this, Xia Yu walked a long way to the left and came to a door that showed .5 years. At this point, I am not at Tivot and the distance is long enough. What will happen if I go in? With deep curiosity, Xia Yu walked in. After a hazy white light, Xia Yu saw the scene before her clearly. A very lush grape trellis, with plump and round purple-red grapes on top. Xia Yu can even smell the unique aroma of grapes. Just as he was about to pick one and taste it, there was a discussion coming from not far away. Today is the coming-of-age ceremony for young Master Dialek, and we must prepare well. The two maids were laughing and holding the vegetables they had bought, and at this moment, Xia You also saw the whole scene clearly. He had seen this place before while flying in the sky. It should be the Dawn Winery 5 years ago. Just as he was contemplating, he suddenly heard footsteps behind him. "Are you the guest who came to attend my coming-of-age ceremony? Although the banquet time has not yet arrived, you can go and sit down first. When I accompany my father to deliver the last batch of goods and come back, the banquet will officially begin." The red-haired boy behind him showed a cheerful smile on his face and invited Xia You to the banquet. End of this chapter.